You ever think about someone and then, bam, they call you? Or you're craving something specific and suddenly it just appears in your life? Well, for a long time now, there's been this idea that it's not just a coincidence. It's a universal law that you can actually use. Today, we are diving deep into this really fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty controversial concept, the law of attraction. At its heart, it really boils down to this ancient, super powerful idea. This quote, which people often attribute to the Buddha, just nails it. The belief that our inner world, our thoughts, directly shapes the world we experience on the outside.
And that, right there, leads to the big, kind of seductive question, doesn't it? What if your mind isn't just watching the movie of your life, but is actually the director? What if it's sending out signals that literally mold the reality around you? I mean, that's the huge promise that things like The Secret made so popular.
Okay, so how is this all supposed to happen? For people who really believe in it, the law of attraction isn't just some self-help trick. Nope. To them, it's a fundamental law of the universe, just as real and as constant as, say, gravity.
The whole engine behind this is the idea of like attracts like. So the theory goes that every single thought, every emotion you have, gives off a vibrational frequency. Good feelings, like joy, love, gratitude, they have a really high frequency. And negative ones, you guessed it, fear, anger, they have a low one. The goal then is to broadcast those high-frequency signals to pull in high-frequency experiences. The book The Secret made this super simple with a catchy 3-step process. First, you have to ask, and that means getting crystal clear on what you want and sending that request out there. Step 2, you have to believe, like believe with every fiber of your being that it's already on its way to you. And finally, step 3 is to receive. You do this by getting yourself into the emotional state of already having it. So how do you actually do all that? Well, practitioners have this whole toolkit of techniques. They do things like vivid visualizations, they repeat positive affirmations over and over, they create vision boards to keep their goals front and center, they practice gratitude to raise their vibration, and they even act as if they already have what they want. But what if the power isn't coming from the cosmos? What if the real magic is actually happening right inside our own skulls? Let's completely shift gears for a second and look at this whole thing from a psychological point of view. Okay, so you've set your intention. You're laser focused on your goal. And suddenly, it's like you're seeing signs and opportunities related to it everywhere. Is the universe really sending them to you? Well, psychology has a pretty straightforward name for this phenomenon. It's called confirmation bias. It turns out our brains are basically wired to look for proof of what we already believe. So when you're all in on manifesting something, you start to notice every little thing, every hit that supports your belief, while totally forgetting all the times, all the misses, when nothing happened. So the psychological take is this: you're not actually attracting new things into your life. What's really happening is that your brain's internal filter is just getting way better at spotting the opportunities and connections that were probably there all along. So you can see we have two very different explanations for the same experience, right? What the law of attraction calls sending a cosmic signal, psychology calls mental rehearsal, which builds new pathways in your brain. And what practitioners call aligning your frequency, psychology calls priming a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, or ARS, which is basically your brain's relevance filter. Let's just break this down even further. That core principle, like attracts like, looks a whole lot like what psychologists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Basically, your positive expectations actually change your behavior, and that, in turn, gets better responses from people and situations. Seeing opportunities everywhere, that's your RAS working overtime. And the reason visualization feels so real and powerful, well, it's a technique called mental rehearsal, and it's been used by elite athletes and surgeons for decades to improve performance. So it's pretty clear there's some real psychological power in these tools. But when you take the more mystical claims literally, this whole philosophy can become a real double-edged sword. And there are some pretty significant dangers we have to talk about. One of the biggest criticisms is that this constant pressure to be positive can lead to something called toxic positivity. It's this fear that even one negative thought might attract disaster. So people start suppressing totally valid emotions like sadness or grief or anger, which all the research shows is just incredibly damaging to your mental health in the long run. And that leads us to what is by far the most serious and troubling critique. If you believe you are 100% responsible for creating your reality, then what does that imply about people who are sick, or living in poverty, or are victims of violence? It creates this terrible framework where victims are actually blamed for attracting their own suffering through their negative thoughts.
So, the real key here is finding a balance between having a powerful mindset and acknowledging reality. To fight that toxic positivity, we have to accept that all of our emotions are valid. To avoid victim blaming, we have to recognize that external factors, plain old bad luck, and other people's actions exist. And to make sure we're not just waiting around for magic to happen, we have to pair our intentions with a solid, real-world action plan.
All right, so after digging into the metaphysical claims and the psychological explanations, what's the bottom line? What is the real secret here?
Maybe the best way to think about it all is this. Your mind isn't some magic wand that you just wave to instantly change the world. It's more like a garden. The thoughts you plant, the beliefs you choose to nurture, the emotions you water every day, those things will absolutely 100% determine what you harvest in terms of your actions and how you see the world.
So here's the real takeaway. By all means, use these powerful tools for what we know they're good for, getting clear on your goals, boosting your motivation, and sharpening your focus. But you have to actively reject the toxic parts, like victim blaming. And always, always, always pair that powerful mindset with a practical plan of action. Because at the end of the day, the true power isn't about trying to control the universe. It's about mastering yourself.